Welcome back. I've got a different video for you guys this week. I've got my buddy Derek here. We've been friends for about 12 years, and today we just want to talk to you guys a little bit more about saving money and frugality, and he's an expert on that kind of thing. He's been doing it for a while, so he really knows what he's talking about. Even I've taken pointers from him, so hopefully this video can be helpful for you guys. We'll kind of have like an interview style, podcast style video for you guys this week. And so yeah, let's dive right into it. Before we get started, you want to just give us like a quick background about like you and like what made you want to or have to adopt this kind of like lifestyle, or like how you got started?
Yeah, for sure. So I think it mostly just kind of started off like in university, because obviously like fresh out of high school, that's kind of where you first get your taste of adulthood and stuff like that, and like learn how to pay bills and all that stuff. And like I had to pay for like all of university and everything like that, so I learned pretty quick like the value of money, and especially since like I started working when I was like 10 with like paper routes and stuff like that. So I definitely like with the small kind of like salaries that I had back in the day, like with those like little jobs here and there on the weekends, like I realized that pretty quickly that like the money I earned was like not much. So it's like I had to like really understand like how to save it at an early age. And again, yeah, like in university and everything, like trying to manage my money with tuition, like living expenses, and, like food and all that stuff. It definitely took probably like a year or two to really like kind of like understand where all my money was going. But what really kind of like got me there was I think in my second year, like originally I wasn't taking student loans because I didn't necessarily like understand them, but it got to a point where I had less than $100 in my bank account, and I was like, oh boy, like I'm not going to be able to eat this next month. So that's when I really realized like taking out student loans and understanding that this wasn't my money, and that's where like the frugality kind of started in a sense. Like it always been in the back of my mind, but that really kind of like opened my eyes to you know how scary it can be when you're like that low in your bank account and stuff like that. So that just kind of opened my eyes, and yeah, I've just kind of kept that perspective since.
The student loan aspect is kind of scary because, like you said, it's this money that you get given to you, I guess, for lack of a better word. And then you're just kind of spending that on like tuition and like housing and all these other costs, and then you're kind of just expected to pay that back at a future date where you have no idea what you're going to be earning in the future or something like that. So yeah, I guess kind of tied to like what you talked about in your like background and explanation is like, do you think it was like more born out of necessity, or do you think if you like had like this RESP or some kind of like savings plan for education that you would feel like maybe less frugal today than you are? Or do you think that maybe it was just born out of the fact that you had to take student loans and kind of were in that position that kind of pushed you to that level?
Yeah, I think like a lot of it is just like we don't realize it, but like it's just also kind of the way we grow up. Because again, like on the topic of loans, like I've definitely seen people with the mindset that they're like, they get this huge sum of money deposited in their accounts, and they're like, oh my God, like what can I do with all this money? Like let me spend all of it. But like that could just be a reflection of how they grew up, and like maybe like a high income like kind of thing where they're used to like whatever they want they get in a sort of sense. But again, I think growing up and having like my parents like driving for kind of me to get a job and understand how all that works, I think definitely drove home the point that like me having to earn money to buy what I wanted definitely like taught me a good lesson in a sense, and understanding again how to manage money. But yeah, I think just a combination of all those things. I kind of forget what you asked. I'm not gonna lie.
That's all good. Yeah, I was just asking about like, do you think it was like born in the like loan aspect? Like, for example, like I guess you kind of answered this already, but just the fact that you had to take student loans and you were with that $100 left in your bank account that really pushed you like mentally to kind of push forward in terms of like, oh shit, I need to cut costs like because I have almost no money left? Or do you think that if you weren't in that position, you wouldn't be like where you are today?
Yeah, I think it definitely helped, but I think I was already kind of like in that mindset.
Mm-hmm.
But I just remember like there was a moment, like I was talking to my roommate about it, and like it's a bit off topic, but like I was trying to like go on a date with a girl and like go out to dinner, but I'm like, I can't do that. So like that's where I realized like having no money like limits what you want to do, and like definitely like obviously like it stresses you out, but like just the realization that you have to look at your bank account to realize what you can do today or something like that. I think that definitely helped teach me as well, because like I didn't want to be in that situation again, because like an opportunity like approaches and I'm like, I can't do anything about it because I can't afford it, right?
Exactly.
So I think that definitely helped, but I think the frugality was always kind of there, just again given how I grew up, just around having to work for what I wanted. I think that was really drilled into my head at a young age. So again, like an example of that, like when I did start working when I was young, like um, my brother and I wanted the new Xbox 360 and everything, and my mom was like, "Yeah, that's great, except you guys are gonna have to work for it." Which we split it, the two of us. It was like, I don't know, a $400 console, but when you're working doing a paper route that pays, I can't remember, like maybe 10 or 20 bucks a night, then you see how long it takes you to achieve to get that console, and then you realize, wow, like every night I have to go and walk in the freezing cold, toss some papers, and do this continuously, like week over week, over a couple months, just to finally obtain it. Then yeah, I think that's just an example of like, and especially I was what, like 9 or 10, so that really got like drilled into my head of this is how it works. So
Exactly. Yeah, I think that's also like a big thing in like today's world. Like there's so many like online jobs you can do where people aren't actually putting in like physical work to actually earn that money. And like although you might put in time and stuff like that, like in the end it is just a paycheck. You didn't really like work that hard, so to speak, I guess,
yeah,
versus like, if you're actually like doing that paper route, like you said, and like you have to incrementally save for that thing, then it's like not only do you appreciate what you get more in the end, but it's also, you're way more aware of what you're buying and that like what you want to save for. So you're not spending money unnecessarily. So yeah, you mentioned with your paper route, was that your first job? Is that when you officially started working, or is that I guess just
yeah,
like
I
during
think
school?
I think so. I think that was the first official job, I guess. Yeah.
Cool, yeah. So in terms of like, because I know like I don't know if how specific we want to get in terms of like your savings and stuff, but in terms of like your savings that you've amassed now, like when did that start accumulating? Like was that during school or was that when you started working?
Like my current savings, like when did
Yeah,
I start kind of like saving money,
yeah,
sort of thing.
exactly.
Yeah, I think like obviously like it always starts when you're like a little kid, like tooth fairy under the pillow, your first dollar. It's like, oh, put it in the piggy bank kind of thing. But but yeah, I think just obviously like those early jobs where like, let's be real, I wasn't really making any money, to be honest. Most of those jobs were just kind of like work this job, get this money, and then spend it on what you want, right?
Mm-hmm.
But eventually, once it gets into kind of like middle school, late middle school, high school kind of thing, where yeah, like I was working every weekend, and then that specific purpose was to build my own wealth, because obviously I wasn't going out and buying a new Xbox every like 2 weeks kind of thing, right? But yeah, that was again like just to save up money for the future. And yeah, like the mindset was like, once I hit 18, obviously I'm not in school anymore, like I'll have bills to pay and stuff like that. So it was just kind of building up like a little nest egg for myself. um, and again, just being able to, if I'm out and about without the parents around or whatever, I can afford to eat, I can afford to do activities by myself with my own money, and not having to depend on somebody else. Just experiencing that freedom was also really nice, and I understood that again in the future, that is what life is essentially. So yeah, that was a really good like point to understand early on. And once I graduated high school, like, and at the time I didn't know I was going to university, but being able to pay tuition out of my pocket from all the work I'd done in the past, without having to worry about student loans right off the bat, that also felt really good and rewarding.
So I know we've talked about this kind of off camera and like kind of just as we go about life, but how much approximately were you like saving early on in terms of like how much money you were earning, and then like just like as a percentage of your income, And then like, has that changed since then, since now you're working full time?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say like previously because I can't say like my 17-year-old self was like keeping a budget, was like
Yeah.
keeping expenses and like keeping my receipts to really track all that. But again, like every dollar I was saving was just going into my bank account because at that point in time I didn't have a need for it. Like obviously I wasn't paying for housing and food and clothing and stuff like that. Like obviously that's my parents were paying for that. Um, but yeah, once I got, once I did start working, that's really when I started keeping track. Because again, university, you're at a net negative, really.
Yeah,
Like you can
exactly.
have a part-time job, but you're still losing a bunch of money. Um, but yeah, like once I started working, I'm really kind of like focused on data and when it applies to like myself. So I love keeping track of things. And it's also like a good habit to get into because from personal experience, like HR can be wrong and stuff like that. So it's a good habit to like check your paychecks to make sure that you have the right amount of money on there and put in a spreadsheet or whatever and like track how much you're earning and how much you're spending. And just like that gives you an idea of where your money is and where it's going. And at the same time, it gives you a perspective of whether you're actually saving and doing good, or if you're like, hold on, like where's all my money going? What should I be doing to reduce that? So yeah, I'd say like once I graduated within like the first year of full-time work, then I definitely made it a point to focus on that. And again, like really focusing on that when you're young kind of builds a foundation for like the rest of your life. And then you're able to gain like experience and all that, tracking like expenses and making sure that all your money is where it should be and you're earning the right amount of money. So I think it's important to drill that in your head when you're young.
Definitely. If you guys haven't checked out the budgeting video, it'll be right here. But yeah, I like the point you said about checking your paycheck, and especially like when we're young and stuff, like that's something we really need to do because sometimes they feel like they can, get away with, some younger person that's working that doesn't check their paycheck maybe, and they can be like, oh, we can, short them a couple $100, they won't notice. So yeah, definitely a really good point to check that. I actually didn't think about that for a long time, but especially if you're salaried, it's something that's less common, I would say, versus if you're like an hourly worker. So yeah, make sure you keep track of your hours and just keep a spreadsheet, like you said. It's a good way to make sure. Yeah.
And it might not even be like the company actually trying to like short you of money, but like I've experienced like when it came to, I was like on a contract, and when it came to like handling like vacation time, and there's a lot of like uncertainty and like different parties weren't maybe on the same page. And yeah, I just think it's important to just run the numbers and like see if it actually makes sense, because again, like people who are making your paychecks are human as well. Like I make tons of mistakes when I'm working with numbers, they might too. Like sure, they have software and everything, but it's just like when they're manually inputting whatever it is, then mistakes can arise. So it's at the end of the day, it's on you to catch them because it doesn't affect them at the end of the day, right?
Yeah, exactly. Or even like where you punch in and punch out, you might have done that incorrectly and track different hours than they might have, right? So
yeah,
that's
exactly.
definitely another thing. I know we've talked about like kind of like your savings and like how much you were like earning and like during school and stuff like that. So roughly on average, like what would you say you were like earning on average, and then how much were you saving? So I know we talked about percentages earlier that we didn't quite get to, but yeah, do you want to break down the numbers for us?
Yeah, for sure. So yeah, like obviously I think a big factor, like everybody is kind of different in this area. Which is my first job out of school. Like I was doing research, which, obviously doesn't pay that great, but I was living in a low cost of living area. So like my rent was relatively cheap. Groceries were cheap, and like transportation and all that were cheap. So, again, like I can't remember like specific numbers, but just based on what I was looking at, like, I've more or less aimed to save like 30 to 50% of my salary. Obviously circumstances do come in the way that doesn't make that possible for certain months, but again, I just think you have to adopt a lifestyle that reflects your income. So at that point in time, like I didn't have a car. Thankfully, like I was close enough to a bus route that would take me to the university, and they had like a super cheap bus program. It was like $150 for like 4 months, for example.
Oh,
Like,
wow.
so just really taking advantage of that stuff, to reflect again the income, and not going crazy and, you know, going on trips every weekend here and there. Like, obviously that's fun, but you know, if you are trying to build that nest egg and save some money, given your salary, sometimes, you know, it's best to maybe stay in and do something else for the weekend. So again, yeah, like that really drove home the point of trying to save money while also like enjoying life, but being considerate of how much money I was making at the time. And obviously, as your career grows, you know, people do talk about lifestyle inflation. It's like, oh, like my paycheck's bigger. I get to spend all this money on more stuff now. But at the same time, it's really important to like adopt a lifestyle given like what you kind of start at, and like try to stay at that. Because if you're able to live at like a good quality of life right off like your lowest salary like that you're making, then what says you can't live the same lifestyle when you're making like double that, right?
Exactly.
So yeah, like I've always kind of aimed ideally to save like 50% of my salary, but you know, again, cost of living, salary, expenses, like whether it's like medical expenses or like car issues or whatever, like they come and go. So, but yeah, I've always kind of targeted like 50%.
It's really solid, honestly. That's like so much more. Yeah, probably in like the top 1 percentile of like people, I think, with that saving. But yeah, I mean, like, do you know roughly what you were earning, like as a research analyst?
Yeah, yeah, mostly just like research analyst. Honestly, can't remember. It was like in between like 30 and 40, I want to say,
Yeah, so
somewhere
30,
in there.
40,000 a year.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I mean, I'd have to run the numbers, but like it was somewhere in there.
Yeah.
Rather low, but
Still 50% you're saving, roughly 30 to 50.
yeah, again, like I don't think I was putting as much like emphasis on tracking my budgets and all that back then, because that was quite a few years ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I was still focused on saving money. And
yeah, you saw the balance growing like month over month kind of
yeah
thing. Okay.
Yeah,
Nice.
it's not like I was in a deficit at all.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, that's like such an important thing too, because I know for like some people, and I know myself too, it's like, you know, if you have like a checking and a savings account and you're just like, oh, my checking's low, and then transfer from your savings, like,
yeah,
so it's so important to just have those accounts separate as well. Like you probably know that as well, as just having those accounts not even associated with one another. So it's like you have to go through like 10 steps to get money from your savings into your checking. So
yeah,
smart. Even better is just put in a GIC if you can miss it for that period of time.
Yeah,
then you can't touch it at all.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, no, that's crazy. So moving on from the research position, you then moved where you were in Prince George in British Columbia, right?
Yeah, and then yeah, I moved out to Ontario for what I thought was my dream job. Didn't turn out that way.
It's a topic for another episode.
But yeah, that came with a decent like bump in salary. Obviously, because going from the research field into private consulting, obviously there's a bit more money. Not necessarily in my field of work, but more money regardless.
Yeah. So where were you at when you first started there? That was with I won't say the company, but with a more like environmental firm, right?
Yeah. Geez, what was I making there? It was just like below 60 or something.
Okay. Yeah.
So obviously higher cost of living out here.
Yeah.
So obviously I had to adjust to that, but I think with the increased salary, then obviously I was still able to kind of reach my target. And then, yeah, like I had a bunch of expenses because I needed a car for work and I needed like a bunch of tools and all that stuff. So that does add up. But again, with a higher salary, I think I was still able to save what I wanted to.
That's awesome. Yeah. And then, so you're not at that job anymore, right? You switched to another job. So you're at a different environmental firm now. So what's changed since then?
I mean, it's more or less the same. Like it's similar type of work. Like it's still private consulting. It's more or less the same. But yeah, it's
same pay roughly.
Yeah. Okay. There's not much of a difference, just better quality of life.
So yeah, there's like being frugal, and like ever since you started doing that, it's been like a handful of years now, right? So do you feel like being frugal and like having less in your life, I guess, and like being like a more of a minimalist, I guess, I would imagine, and because I know you, I know that you are somewhat of a minimalist. Do you think you've like been able to appreciate like the simpler things and like the things you do have in life like more than you otherwise would?
Yeah, for sure. Like I can't say I'm like minimalist like by choice. Like obviously I like having less things, but just from personal experience, like having to move like every like different cities. Like I mean, the past 4 years I've lived in 5 cities or whatever. Like right, so I think just constantly like moving and like even like from different provinces and stuff like that. I'm always looking to like get rid of stuff, and like I hate taking more in, just because it makes it like more of a pain in the ass to like move all that stuff again. Um, so that's kind of where the minimalist lifestyle kind of comes from, I guess. And yeah, I just personally like anytime like something is cluttered, it just like really affects me. Like I just can't focus the same when there's like stuff everywhere, and like I have to
Yeah,
keep track of all this stuff here and there. Like, so I just for simplicity's sake, I just aim to have less stuff.
that's good. Yeah, and like, do you think like being frugal and like maybe not buying as much as like other people would like help that as well?
Yeah, like I definitely try to avoid buying stuff. Like I really only buy the stuff that I need.
Mhm.
Because again, I just hate having too much stuff, and I mean that just kind of goes with um, just who I am as a person and like my beliefs, which I'm
Mhm.
sure we'll get in later, which definitely affect my buying choices and what I might or might not buy.
Kind of a controversial one. Do you feel like being frugal has made you kind of miss out on certain opportunities, or like, or do you feel like it's done the opposite? Because you mentioned before that when you didn't really have any money, you might have missed opportunities because you didn't have enough money to experience them.
Yeah, I mean, it depends who you ask. Like obviously um like I don't feel like I'm missing out. Like sure, maybe I'm missing out on like the new technology. Like I don't have the latest iPhone with like 13 cameras on the back of my phone, but that's not really something that affects me as it might other people. But the one thing that I kind of like don't want to be frugal on is like experiences.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't care for materialistic things at all. Um, Honestly, like if it works, it works. If I can repair it, I'll repair it. But I'm not gonna go out and buy like top of the line like a Gucci belt or whatever. Like I don't need that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, one thing that I do kind of allow myself to spend on again is experiences and travel. So ever since I've been out of school, I just try to like every year go on like this huge trip to again, because it's one thing to be frugal, but like what says you don't die next year and then you never get to experience your money, right?
Exactly.
So I think putting that money to like enjoy different cultures and go and explore the world is something that is important to me. And that's obviously like when I travel, I'm not booking like a 5-star hotel with like a pool in my room or whatever, But I still travel frugal,
Yeah.
but I'm not gonna hold myself back from spending like $2,000 or whatever to go and travel for a month in a country, right?
Exactly. And honestly, like a lot of countries these days, you can probably live cheaper than like where we live, for example. Like you
Yeah,
can pretty much live for the same, if not less.
yeah,
So
yeah, exactly.